Hey guys, what's cracking? It is Kraken Nation, and today we are picking up our Pokemon Team Building University once again, looking at the hyper offensive side of the team building spectrum as requested by Spider-Man. Mad shoutouts to him for inspiring me to keep up with this series. So our journey started off with, I guess, looking at specific roles throughout the metagame, and it has progressed to looking at archetypes and how they match up, and now we've gone from all the way from stall, bulky balance, bulky offense, and now we're finally culminating with hyper offense. Hyper offense being basically the most offensive type of play style. So with that, we're going to look about what makes hyper offense. What is the kind of things that this play style builds itself around. And we're going to start that off by saying that it utilizes offensive matchups to try and keep pressure at the course of the match. What this means is on turn one, generally, a hyper offense will either be while a bulky balance or a balanced team, for example, might not care as much on turn one about how much of a matchup they have. Hyper offense really does care about how much of a matchup they have on turn one because it's really important for them to gain traction right off the bat and try to keep that pressure throughout the course of the match. So if they don't have it on turn one, it can be very tough. It's for this reason that a lot of times hyper offense is tough to play because it does rely so heavily on matchup, as we're going to see. So hyper offense is the kind of thing where like you really got to know just how Pokemon work. I feel like in a lot of ways hyper offense is the hardest play style to play just because it just requires such a complex series of thoughts turns ahead, whereas stall or maybe just a more defensive play style in general, you kind of have some safety. Hyper offense is kind of you have to play like every game a certain way, and that's you have to recognize what that way is in turn one, and that's the concept of adaptive win conditions. But for basically just forcing opponents switches because you have such offensive pressure, hopefully allows you to gain chip damage for important KOs later on in the match. And so you're able to gain and keep momentum through offensive matchups and constant pressure, which is kind of what I was trying to touch on earlier, is that you really need to be constantly, matchup and momentum needs to be on your side of the field. Hyper offense tends to really struggle once they lose momentum because they really can't switch. Generally, a lot of these Pokemon you'll see on hyper offensive teams can't switch in and out extremely easily. So for that reason that you're gonna want to really just try to preserve your momentum throughout the match. You basically play constantly around the concept of win conditions where you are setting yourself up for final play, sweep, and or clean. So basically, like I said again earlier, touching on that topic, basically from turn one, you're going to kind of be setting yourself on a course. And while you, of course, sometimes are going to need to adapt, and usually should need to adapt your win condition to what you're seeing in front of you, you basically throughout the game are constantly thinking 5-10 turns ahead into like what series of turns is going to get me to really proceed to where I want to proceed and how this match is going to go. So you're kind of more than any other playstyle, hyper offense really thinking ahead, and so that can be good. It can also be dangerous if you get it wrong. And if things don't go your way, you can a lot of times put yourself in a much worse position than you were originally in. If it goes your way, a lot of times you can just completely dominate your opponent from there. So we're going to start looking at the roles with elements of the team section. And first up, we got utility leads. And it still says balance teams. I always forget to change these, so my apologies. But hyper offense really values the leads that are giving forms of utility, such as hazards and status, to the team. So that's things like Galvantula, Ferrothorn, and Klefki. All these Pokemon offer specific things. So that starts with Galvantula offering sticky webs. Things like Smeargle can do that as well. But sticky webs are really great for a lot of bulkier hyper offense teams that really want to be able to hit hard, but can't necessarily do the speed to do that. So Pokemon that come to mind with that are things like Kyurem Black, Heracross, hashtag CSML Season 5 Finals, referencing my battle against Realize where he had Galvantula and those two Pokemon, being a Mega Heracross and Kyurem, to bop me. But yeah, so offensive teams can really appreciate Galvantula's ability to slow down your opponent's team, especially if you're playing against an opposing hyper offense team. It can really be beneficial. Ferrothorn obviously being our Stealth Rocker example, and then Klefki being able to spike stack as well as spread the status, as such as Thunder Wave. Ferrothorn also doing that, but just the ability to set up screens is also really nice on Klefki because screens can a lot of time give you a chance to set up for a sweep or switch in something that you normally can't switch in on a hyper offensive team built around generally frailer Mons. Screens can definitely be beneficial. Next up, we've got hazard clears. I realize I'm missing Latios and Latias, which are two really big examples of hazard clears on the hyper offensive playstyle. But don't listen to what I'm saying about this playstyle focusing heavily on switches, because this is wrong. I forgot to update these. This playstyle does not focus heavily on switches. I want to make that clear. You should not be switching. But that said, hazard clears can still be important if a certain mon needs to preserve something like a focus sash, which hyper offense is an item that hyper offense uses a lot to help itself set up for a sweep. If you need to preserve something like a focus sash, or let's say you need to sorry about that. Let's say you need to preserve a focus sash, or you need to keep something out of a range of KO so it can set up. Generally, just keeping mons from getting whittled down enough that they can't get the opportunity to set up that they need. Hazard clearing is kind of, honestly, a lot of times late game hazard clearing is what hyper offense really uses hazard clearing for, because it does set up for that end game sweep most of the time. Offensive pivots can be nice because they can. Why does it say, man, these bio descriptions are absolute garbage, so really don't listen to them. I am sorry about that. But an offensive pivot can really help you out because, like I said earlier, it does kind of go against what I said about no switching, but this is a little different because an offensive pivot can help you find matchup earlier in the match if possible. Like I said, you really want to be able to get offensive matchup on constant turns. These three mons here, as well as other Volt switches such as Mega Metric, even U-turners such as Scissor, Talonflames, the Raptor, all these mons can really put a lot of offensive pressure. And there's definitely a lot of combination you can do, such as a Staraptor could offer you a potential, a Banded Staraptor could offer you a physical wall breaker as well as an offensive pivot, or a Talonflame could offer you an offensive pivot and a cleaner, or something like that. So all these mons can duel their roles, but offensive pivots, yeah, are just really helpful on gaining traction through aggressive switches and the like. Special tanks can be definitely beneficial, although you will not see things like Clefable. A special tank can definitely be helpful because there are times where you may still need to take a hit, and a special tank can a lot of the time retaliate fairly hard. The same goes for physical tanks. You're going to see a lot more of these type of Pokemon on hyper-offensive teams, especially things like Tank Chomp are the kind of mon that can take a hit and dish back damage pretty hard and really help a hyper-offensive team find that defensive traction it may need. Although hyper-offensive teams really shouldn't be looking for a defensive ability at any points in the match, I feel like so that's kind of counterintuitive. It really is beneficial for a hyper-offensive team at times. I want to stress that at times to be able to fall on some kind of backbone, which is why, at least in my experience, I really like the Scargar core, which is a Tank Chomp plus Spadef Skarmory. That's a core running Iron Head for beat fairies. That's a hyper-offensive core that doesn't really break a lot of hyper-offensive playstyles, but can be a core. However, I will say that that's kind of more towards bulky offense, and that now that we're going that way. But there are sometimes defensive cores that are more tank cores that a hyper-offensive team can benefit from. Next up, we have physical sweepers. This is going to be also things like Zardax, Dragon Dancer in general, Swords Dancers, and stuff like that. But a physical sweeper is able to boost up its attack and or speed to punch holes and dismantle teams. Again, this is going to be the bread and butter of a lot of hyper-offensive, just offensive in general type teams. And that same goes for special sweepers to able to boost up their special attack and or speed to punch holes and dismantle teams. So that's things like Calm Mind Raikou, Calm Mind Kelpio, and of course the ever-present Tailglow, Manaphy. Shoutouts to True Blue, but Manaphy is, and as well as these other models, are definitely all capable, very capable sweepers. And sweepers are a lot of times what you are going to be basing your win condition off of. Just really punching some holes, dishing out some damage. Next up, we've got our physical wall breakers, which are generally coming mid-game with a physical wall breakers able to quickly produce massive amounts of physical offense in an effort to overwhelm and break down defensive cores and Pokemon. As you're going to see, this can be extremely beneficial in a sweep or cleaning scenario, which is one thing that hyper offense really utilizes that other more defensive playstyles may not actually get to see quite as much of. Physical wall breakers and special wall breakers, the like, are both extremely beneficial when you're looking at a hyper offensive team, as they really can pave the way for that late game clean. Because, for example, some really bulky mons, let's say such as like Cresselia or Glasgow or or Chansey or something. A lot of these bulkier mons, if they get worn down to a certain range, can be cleaned up. But if not, they can really be a problem late game when you're running out of ways to kill them. Because hyper offense doesn't end up sacking off mons a lot, either sacking off or just letting them die or whatnot. So you're going to find yourself in a lot of the time being kind of in the late game, and you're really going to need these special wall breakers to have done their job earlier in the game of weakening the Pokemon that they're going to be faced up against. Physical wall breakers as well, obviously operating on that same principle. Finally, a role that is exclusive to hyper offense, in my opinion, that a lot of other playstyles will not be able to utilize, is the role of the cleaner, which is once the opposing team has been weakened, a cleaner can make use of good offensive potential and speed priority with little setup requirement and clean your opponent's team. The 3 Pokemon you see before me are all extremely notoriously fast in the OU tier, as well as potentially having a very high unboosted level of attack, especially in the case of Choice Band Talonflame, obviously, because normal Talonflame's attacks isn't that high. But these 3 Pokemon all can make use of either priority, other examples being things like Mega Scissor and stuff, which you'll see later on in this video. But basically just come in when the sweeping is done, when the wall breaking is done. What a clean is at its core is just sifting through the remains of that opponent's team and knocking them out one by one. A lot of times, a cleaner will end up getting the most kills of a game, but it's really just cleaners a lot of the time will not have the pure power to pull off a sweep. Some of them do. Perhaps you have a Swordsdance Talonflame that is hoping to be able to pull off a sweep. That is possible. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say most of the time a clean will happen after your wall breaks, after your sweeps, after your hazards have been set, everything. And then your cleaners can come in at the very end of the game and just be able to be an unstoppable force on your opponent's team. And just, let's say all your opponent's team has 3 or 4 Pokemon left, all under 50%. Chances are a Banded Talonflame can do that damage, enough damage to kill those in most of the tier. So can Lopunny with unresisted coverage. So can Life Orb Weavile holding like Icicle Clash, Low Kick, or Poison Jab, or whatever it needs to. So that's basically what I'm trying to say, that you can basically come at the end of the game after everything else is done and just clean up the remnants of your opponent's team, hence the name Cleaner. And I really want to stress, people a lot of time make the mistake of with cleaning that you have to do it earlier in the match or something. You really got to think when you're going to bring out your cleaner and how late it's going to be in the game, because bringing out a cleaner at the wrong time, you'll find yourself at the end of the game not able to just finish stuff off, or you'll just waste this Pokemon that could have been so valuable in your win condition, because a lot of times your cleaner is actually, it's not going to be your sweeper that ends up being your win condition. A lot of the times your sweeper is going to start to function more as a wall breaker towards the end of its sweep, and your cleaner is going to be your win condition, which is getting this Pokemon in with a sufficient amount of health to take whatever hit it may need to take, and then able to weaken everything else to the point where this cleaner can now OHKO or 2KO everything that it needs to without itself dying. I really want to stress that. Again, it is a role that you won't really find in a lot of other teams, but Hyper Offense really does emphasize the role of the cleaner. So here we have a team example of a really fun Hyper Offense team that I myself have had a lot of fun with. Basically, it relies on Mega Scissor being your cleaner slash sweeper, and Huron Black being the main source of wall breaking, while the rest of the team functions to support those Pokemon in one role or another. But not just support, but gain offensive momentum themselves. Only one of these Pokemon, being Klefki, is a non-offensive Pokemon, so we'll start with that. Klefki is, of course, not an offensive Pokemon, but Klefki is a great utility mon, and as this team isn't actually particularly fast, Klefki really is able to function in a role where it can Thunder Wave stuff and slow stuff down so that Scissor can click Bug Bite, Kyurem can click Ice Beam, and they can, these slower mons that have stronger attacks can now effectively utilize them. Of course, Spikes is very useful when you're running things like powerful attackers such as these, because they're able to effectively whittle down the opposition. And then, so that's really all that has to be said about Klefki, honestly. Latias is nice, not only because it can offer some form of default support, which may be kind of weird with Klefki, but a lot of times Latias is really nice because it allows you to play more recklessly with not Heat Train, but Huron Black and Scissor earlier on in the game, and that's because of a Healing Wish. I really like Latias on Hyper Offensive team because Latias is very capable of both speed and offensively with holding a Life Orb. You can drop some pretty hard freaking Dracos. Once Latias is in range of like 10, 20%, 30% HP, once it's at the point where it can no longer take the hits it needs to, excuse me, once it's in that range, you can drop your Healing Wish and heal up one of your offensive Pokemon to full, which can be really critical in an endgame win condition. And yeah, like I said, it does allow you to play a lot more recklessly with your offensive Pokemon earlier in the game, which can honestly be huge, because now Scissor basically gets the chance to sweep twice, and that could be a game-winning factor. Next up, we've got Scarf Landorus, which is our offensive pivot, and basically it's just really great at grabbing momentum on turn 1 and then pivoting into something that can now take a hit thanks to Intimidate. But not only that, it just also actually hits like a truck, and Scarf Landorus is really fast. So it's really quite beneficial. Next up, we have Heatran. Heatran is the most defensive mon on this team, while maintaining, I guess, some semblance of offense, disregarding Klefki. But Heatran is really nice because it's another way to beat Ferrothorn. It's a way for this team to really support Scissor. Heatran also functions as a stealth rocker, which is really critical. But specifically on this team, I actually was running Stone Edge on my Heatran because Heatran, this team really needed a bird check. Landorus T can't really do it all on its own. It gets pretty easily worn down with no access to recovery. Healing Wish can't always do the job for me, especially when Spikes isn't affecting a lot of birds. So Heatran is a really great Talonflame check specifically. So that's really why I was on this team, is that I was running, I believe, Stealth Rock, Stone Edge, Lava Plume, Protect, basically to help me out against Lopunny, as well as help me out against Talonflame, and then also Ferrothorn, of course. Next up we have Kyurem Black. This is a mixed Kyurem Black running Ice Beam. I believe it was Ice Beam, Outrage, Fusion Bolt, and Earth Power, I think. Basically, this is just a really fantastic mixed wall breaker. Not many Pokemon can boast the ability to hit 370 in both attack and special attack with investment, obviously, but that's a pretty rare feat, and so Kyurem Black is able to come in, just absolutely tear the house down, basically just terrify the opposing team, super hard to switch into as a Pokemon, and then Scissor obviously can come in from there after Kyurem Black has done his wall breaking, and Scissor, being a bulky Swords Dancing variant, come in and clean up shop towards the end of the game, which is how this team essentially functions. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope it was helpful. Obviously, Hyper Alpha can be played a lot of different ways. There are Pokemon, of course, like such as Lopunny. I really think you should start your Hyper Offensive team around your cleaner, and then look from there what needs to be weakened in order for my cleaner to do its job, what needs to be swept through, what needs to be hazard needs to be set, and so on and so forth. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video again. If you did, leave a like, comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. It is always very appreciated. I will be releasing a video on Synergy, which was also requested, which is kind of a touchier topic and a harder thing to really delve into. So we're going to see what we can do. But definitely stay tuned for that, and I will see